before we get into the material, I just want to start off with a little bit of our team. As you can see, our team is growing. And today, you're going to hear from most of our team members, which we're really excited about. And we're also really excited to introduce Karen Pierce, who just started with us this week. So Karen, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick introduction, a little bit about yourself.
Certainly. Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Pierce, a brand new product owner here at Guardian. I spent the last 6 years in content management, first in client success and then product with Unify. Unify was, of course, part of the acquisition from Autodesk. So I continued working at Autodesk, and that journey has really showed me firsthand how frustrating content and standards challenges can be for Revit teams. I'm excited to help solve those problems with Guardian and help your teams work better in Revit. Thanks, Chris. Back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen. I think I could speak for our entire Guardian team. We're incredibly excited to have Karen to be part of our team. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll give Karen a little round of applause, and excited to have her. Great. Let's go over the learning objectives for today. So there we go. A lot of applauses. Love it. So today's sorry, all the comments popping up there. So today's objectives, we're going to focus on how Project Central helps you and your teams communicate better. There's a lot of ways that teams can communicate within Revit and more specifically within Guardian. So Project Central really helps streamline those communications. Also, Project Central provides real-time insights on what's happening in your model. The next is providing model performance metrics, from model opening times to sync times to file sizes. This is all critical stuff to stay up to date with in real time. And lastly, how to make Project Central available to all your users. And if I could ask of a call to action for everyone who's joining the webinar today, is turn on Project Central. If you haven't turned it on, please do it. You'll find it extremely useful for you and your teams. And as I mentioned, also turn it on for your end users. And we'll get more on that later in the webinar. Today, we're going to keep things relatively high level when we're presenting each section of Project Central. So if you want to learn more and get into more in-depth about Project Central, please check out our knowledge base website. And if I could ask my teammates to drop a link into the chat, so you can click on there and you can access our how-to videos. And expectations for today. So as always, we'll make a recording of today's video and post it on the website and our YouTube channel. Mics are live as always. We just ask before you ask any questions, please raise your hand. Now, a lot of questions, we may kind of punt those until later in the webinar, more towards the Q&A section of this at the end. And as always, our chat is live and being actively monitored by our teammates. That's one of the great things we love about our webinars, is how our participants are just highly active in the chat. Now, in some ways, we have trouble keeping up with what's happening in the chat. So we've come up with a little system for each of our teammates to claim a response. So when you see these icons pop up on the chat, that means one of our teammates are in the process of responding. We have found in previous chats that we have multiple responses from our team. So we want to just kind of streamline that for you and kind of get to the point as quickly as possible. All right, with that being said, let's jump into Revit. So we first need to answer, what is Project Central? So Project Central is a command center for BIM managers and digital practice leaders who want transparency into the Revit models without leaving Revit. So it provides model performance data, user behavior, project activity right there, live, so you can keep up to date what's happening in your models. A couple of tips here, just generally with Project Central. One, it sits on top of Revit. You can still move this off to the side and continue to work in Revit. So most teams will actually we'll actually have this on a second monitor so they can keep up to speed. The other thing I want to point out here as a little tip is we have this little button here in the lower left-hand corner, open at project startup. So again, I'll ask everyone to press this. So every time you open a model, Project Central pops up, and then you have access to that data. So just a good little reminder that making it easier so you can access your data as quickly as possible. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and start diving into the individual sections of Project Central, and we're going to start with sync traffic control. So Parley, if you wouldn't mind taking over and presenting STC.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, just one quick thought on the Project Central dialogue as a whole. Coming from the product side of things, you know, many of you are familiar with how much data Guardian does capture. And when we thought about Project Central, the goal was really to bring in only the most relevant data for Revit itself. That data, just the bite-sized bits that are actionable, insightful, things you can work on right from within the model. So I hope that's obvious today as we go through each part of this, especially the sync traffic control. I'm really excited that I get to share this part of Project Central with everybody. You know, especially it's because this is the kind of thing that is really relevant for all of your users, in my opinion. And, you know, anybody's going to appreciate having this kind of insight. And, you know, since there's several of us, quite a few of us on the call, I would love it if, as I'm going through this, if you have this turned on at your firm and have had some, if there's a part of this that's your favorite, or maybe a cool success story, if you wouldn't mind dropping that in the chat, I'd appreciate that. But basically, sync traffic control gives your, and this part of it within the Project Central dialogue, gives your team real-time insights into who's in the model and the synchronization habits of the users and the status of synchronizing in the model currently, real-time. So a lot of people really like the work sharing monitor. We hear all the time, like, hey, yeah, this is kind of like work sharing monitor, but better. And it is, that it is going to show you not only who's synchronizing currently. Josh, thank you. I'm sure there's a lot of work there you're pushing up. But we can see that Josh is syncing right now. And, you know, if anybody else was to try to sync like Chris is currently, he has to be pending until Josh's sync finishes. And so this is a really great way for a team to have that kind of insight. We suggest that everybody actually keep this open. Chris already mentioned that this can kind of be floating while you're working, and it can be enabled for your team members to just always have opened on the side. You know, as we talk with teams every day, it seems that, you know, model issues tend to arise or boil down to something related to synchronization habits, or poor behavior, or something went wrong with the syncing, and those, it's a very complicated, a lot of different aspects to it. But we find that when users are synchronizing regularly, not on top of each other, just things tend to work a lot better. And so if you're an administrator within the system, you have a few different controls here. I just want to point out a few different aspects of this. If you have reminders turned on, you'll see kind of a scheduled time for each user's next reminder to pop up for them. It's completely customizable. And that I just want to clarify, does not necessarily represent the queue. Okay, I just want to take the chance to clarify this. Sometimes I think users get the idea that this is a queue. This is really just a reminder queue. But what we consider the true queue is when you have one person synchronizing and you have multiple users behind them that would show as pending. And that's all going to show up at the top of this. And if you're an administrator, you can move users that are pending to the front of that pending list. That's why my button right now is grayed out. It's because I don't have anybody pending. But you can also remind users to sync. In this case, maybe it's Mitch that we see hasn't synchronized all day yet. So we can ask Mitch to sync, and now he's pending behind Chris. So I hope that makes sense. And, you know, I would just say that we see that teams are really anxious to enable this right out of the gate, sometimes on day one of implementation. It's a great way to build that like really good rapport with Guardian from the get-go, because everyone just loves this. We've seen a lot of teams before that. They've tried Teams, they've tried Excel, they've tried, you know, yelling at each other across the bullpen, and it just really falls apart pretty quick. So this is just kind of a window into this sync traffic control system. Really, I want to put a plug in for next month. We are going to have another office hours webinar where we'll be talking much more in depth about how this can all be customized, and also the strategies behind it. So I haven't kept an eye on the chat. Maybe I'll chime in once I pass things over to Mitch here. But the sync traffic control is powered by some exciting technology, and you know, it's actually a good segue to Mitch's part of this. He'll be talking about messages, which are also powered by the same real-time updating kind of technology. And you'll see actually a lot more features kind of based on that in the short term. So I'll pass it over to you, Mitch.
Thank you, Parley. Yeah, Guardian Messages is a great way to get important messages to your team directly within Revit. No emails, no Teams, no Slack messages, and importantly, no context switching either. A Guardian admin can easily communicate updates firm-wide on a project-by-project basis, or even per model, ensuring that the right people get the right messages quickly and right where they work. When someone's working on a project, it can be really hard to get critical information to them when it's time sensitive. We've heard about situations where ACC goes down and BIM leaders want to urgently tell their team to save their work, or there's a deadline tomorrow. We want to remind everybody to sync and to close the model before they leave for the day. So it's been a lot of fun for us to hear how firms are utilizing this feature. I've given a couple of examples of how some of our clients are using Guardian Messages today. Love to hear from you guys. If anybody has any unique or different ways that you guys are using Guardian Messages today, please pop them in the chat. And I'll kick it to Josh if you would speak a little bit about projects at a glance.
Yes, thank you, Mitch. As I'm sharing my screen, I've got a message coming right in from Chris. I'm guessing sent it out to the whole project team here. I'll sync after I'm done here, Chris. Thanks. Yeah, so I'll talk about project at a glance. I'll also talk about users at a glance. I'll hide the activity feed and leave that excitement for Jake. Project at a glance is a fun part of this tool. It's really the only piece where Guardian, when this is opened, is actively querying the model and really looking for areas that this model can be improved. So depending on what Guardian finds, that's what's going to surface here. Right? Things like groups with limited usage, in-place families, right? And we provide kind of quick links to take you to these things right in that view in this model. Another tip here is if you are trying to like rename a model group or anything like that, you can actually do that right here as well. So an active interface. One thing that I'll say about this as well is this is, I've seen firms use this in a really fun way, right? You can control which parts of Project Central you want to give to all of your team. Like Parley mentioned, sync traffic control is a really popular, probably the most popular that we see of admins granting to the rest of the users. But we've seen Project at a Glance be used in a really cool way to kind of empower users to help with some of this cleanup work, right? They can come in here, start to find some things. So it's not just maybe you doing all that cleanup work, but you have some power users who are helping you out along the way. And the last thing I'll mention about project at a glance is you may have noticed this, but one of my favorite features about Project Central is that you can actually open this for any project through the registered projects list without having to open the model itself. And when you do that, you might have noticed that Project at a Glance isn't there. That's just because Guardian needs the model open in order for it to query and see what's actually inside that model in real time. The other thing that I'll talk about here is users at a glance. Users at a glance is a great way to see who's been in the model. So whereas sync traffic control show you who's in the model currently, as well as some other things that we'll talk about in a minute with the timeline, users at a glance is a great way to see historically who's been in the model and what they've been up to. Whether that's the past 7 days, month, 3 months, you can see exactly who's been in the project, the number of sessions, the number of hours they've spent. In the Backstage dashboard, which we talked about on last month's office hours, in the Backstage dashboard, you can see active time as well. So we break this out even further. But properties added, modified, deleted, commands processed or canceled, warnings generated. I think the two most popular columns here, though, tend to be the different Revit minor versions and desktop connector that people are running. Talk to a lot of teams every day. A lot of people tell me they spend a lot of time tracking down just which versions of software people have, and they really appreciate being able to see this, especially if someone calls the Revit hotline or their phone, says, I have a problem, I'm trying to sync, I don't know what's going on. Just making sure everybody's on the same desktop connector and minor version of Revit can go a long way. Yeah, like Mitch said, if there's other ways that you're using those two sections, would love to hear about them in the chat. Other than that, I will pass it over to Jake to talk about the timeline.
Well, thanks, Josh. Yeah, so timeline, awesome feature, one of my favorites. The timeline gives admin clear visual insights into key model performance, such as file size, project session duration, time required to open the file, time required to sync by users, and warnings. The project session duration is like my absolute favorite part of this. It shows you a color-coded system for each user who's been in the model, depending on the time frame that you're looking at. So in this case, the last 4 hours, we've got everybody here on the call in the model. The kind of punctuated vertical black dotted line, that's how frequently people are syncing. So if you hover over those, you can see a little bit of information on that sync, how long it took, when it happened. If I select one of these, it's actually going to filter the activity feed. Where's Josh at? I know he's hard at work. Clear that breadcrumb. There we go. So during this session, we've got Josh here actually creating some warnings, which is a great segue here to the activity feed. So activity feed delivers real-time transaction level visibility into how users are interacting with your models. Makes it easy to spot certain things as they emerge, and lets you investigate root causes that ensure standards are followed, and helps you get in front of problems before they exist. This occurs live, so as somebody does anything in a model without syncing, it's going to appear within the activity feed. The activity feed is going to show us anything that Guardian's monitoring. So it's showing us monitored, guided, and prevented commands, warnings, as well as your priority level associated with those warnings. So green, yellow, and red priority for low, medium, and high. We've got sync times and transactions. Everything within the activity feed does adhere to that green, yellow, or red kind of theme here. So particularly for transactions, the larger the transaction, the warmer the color. So a transaction that's red might be something to investigate. if I were looking at this and trying to see, file size spiked for some reason. Curious though, from the crowd, what's the largest transaction you may have encountered within Project Central, if you've noticed that before? You can see we've got Parley actively modeling, unpinning stuff. We've got screenshots for anything that captures a before and after, or anytime a screenshot might be applicable. Pro tip here is that you can actually download these screenshots to a larger format so you can zoom in and out and see these things, investigate a little bit closer. Cool. With that, Chris, I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake. One of the things that we talked about earlier is the ability to share Project Central with all of your end users. In previous versions of Guardian, Project Central was only available to admins. And I think it was last fall with the start of 3.2 that we opened it up to all end users. Now, we also may understand that all the information that's provided in this may not be something that you want to share with all your Revit end users. So we've set up a way to customize all this as usual. So if we go back over here to the Guardian tab and go under company settings, here you have allow users to access Project Central. And by customizing this, you can see that you can turn certain sections on or off depending on how you want your end users to interact with Project Central. So I'm going to try this live. I'm going to go ahead and set okay, and I'm going to log out of Guardian as an administrator. And now I close this. And let's go back over to Project Central. Now you can see that I still have access to sync traffic control. I have access to the messages. And even as an end user, I have the ability to send messages to the project or the project group itself. And since we've turned it on, I, as the end user, can keep up to date with my model performance. All the things that Jake has gone over, whether it's the file size or sync times, and to be able to kind of self-regulate a little bit here to say, oh, why is my sync time much worse than everyone else's? Maybe I'm working on Wi-Fi when everyone else is hardlined in. So those are always the little things, the little informations that you can provide to your end users so they can take on some of the responsibilities of getting better at their use of Revit. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Steve Bennett, and he's been using Project Central, and his teams have been utilizing, his end users have been utilizing Project Central for quite a long time now. So I would love for Steve to kind of give us a little tidbit about how he and his teams are using Project Central. Steve, if you can unmute yourself.
Thanks for the intro, Chris. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, I would say that probably our number one use for Project Central is the sync traffic control and being able to either move people to the front of the reminder list or actually remind them so that their Revit will sync. Just last week, we had somebody forget to close out a model overnight. And in the morning, a couple people were having problems with the project and I wanted to run an audit. Revit wouldn't let me because that user had not synchronized with Central. So I opened up Project Central from the projects list without having to open the project, reminded them to sync, and then they were syncing within a couple minutes, and I was then able to progress forward with running an audit on the project. Probably the next most useful thing that users have found is the timeline and being able to see if a project is suddenly taking longer to sync or not, or to open. We've come across in the past where a plugin was pushed out. It wasn't caught in testing that a plugin was causing a slowdown at Synchronize with Central. And so we were able to go into the timeline inside Project Central. We went back, about a month, and sure enough, we could see the spike in the length of times it was taking people to synchronize with Central. and we're able to track back which plugin it was, roll it back, and then people were able to get on with their project work without having big slowdowns. Those are probably two of the biggest items that users are looking at it, either users or project admins.
And Steve, do you have the activity feed live for your users as well?
I believe we do. Yes. So they could see that if they wanted to. I feel like a lot of times people are so focused and heads down on their project work, they sometimes may not always get into there to see it, but it's there if they need it. So if suddenly something goes missing, they could go back and look to see if perhaps something got deleted that was being tracked by Guardian. They'd be able to see the before and after screenshots to figure out what was deleted, who deleted it, and then go from there to try and backtrack getting that item back.
Nice, nice. And I'm just going to open up this for anyone. If you have any questions specifically, Steve, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll be more than happy to have Steve answer that for you. Hear from a real user firsthand.
Yeah, and I put into the chat too. You know, this would be the #1 sync traffic control. That'd be the #1 feature I would implement today if I had to do it fresh. I think back in the day it was preventing CAD imports and model in place. But now, like, it's so fundamentally altered our ability to not get hung up on people syncing. We don't have to force relinquish from the cloud if it's a cloud project, and we're a lot happier with this.
That's awesome to hear. And have you, by any chance, seen that people sync more frequently and their sync times are actually getting faster now that you have sync traffic control?
I haven't recently gone back to look at historical data, you know, over time to see if sync times have reduced, but I do know that we have less people stepping on each other's toes. We have a rather large project at one point that I think we had close to 18 people working on this large hospital project, and they were doing the Teams chat, and like there were 2-3 people deep in a queue, and people were forgetting and stepping on each other's toes virtually with Sync with Central. And they, when we implemented that, they didn't have to do it anymore. Guardian just handles that for that team now, and they're able to work on the project. And if they need to get added to a queue, they add themselves to the Guardian queue, and then when their turn is up, it says, "Hey, it's ready. Let's go," and then they're set to go.
All right, nice, nice. One of the things that Steve had brought up here was the ability to open Project Central without the need to have the model open. So under the Registered Projects button, here you'll find all of your models. And here you come over here to click the model you're looking for and open Project Central. And then you can get that live information. Obviously, no one is in this model, but you can see the activity, the timeline, and whatnot based off the model that you selected without actually, again, opening the model. Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate you adding your perspective and your experiences with Guardian's Project Central.
You're welcome, Chris. Thanks for the invite.
All right. I saw that there was a few questions in the chat, but I just want to open it up. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. One of the questions I did see was, I want to come back to this. Jake, I know you tagged this one, but I want to answer this one live. Can you please show how to see who deletes something in Revit? Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and launch Project Central here. Earlier today, I did delete something. Here, here's one way to see what was deleted. Actually, it's not the way I wanted to go here. Let me see. This is the one I actually wanted to click here. Is here because we have a custom interaction set up for delete protections that looks at when particular elements are being deleted. We were able to see earlier today, or this one was last week, where I was able to delete these selected walls. And again, here you have those before and after screenshots. and also the element IDs. So you can quickly identify when and where things were deleted. Hopefully that answers your question, Jose. And I would also recommend checking out the Guardian's website on delete protections, where we've provided a whole list of examples of the different rules you can create to monitor, guide, and protect certain elements from being deleted.
Hey, Chris, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind if I steal the screen from you and just show how you can access Project Central from the registered projects list. I don't think we showed that yet today.
Actually, I just did. I think you were busy.
Sorry, I missed that. I was answering
No,
a question.
Yeah, no worries. I figure you're busy in the chat there. Yep, no problem. No problem. Any last questions? All right, great. A couple of things Party had mentioned earlier. Next month, we are going to have our August office hours webinar. It's going to be focused on sync traffic control. And so we're really excited to have that. And Parley, would you want to talk about some of the other things that we're working on the lines of Project Central and data?
Sure. Yes. Thanks, Chris. Always fun to talk about that. Project Central, again, like I said before, is really the home for actionable data, and I think we see a huge opportunity with Project Central to add more data here to it, and so you're going to see not only more data appear, but also in other areas as well. Not just Project Central, but we're working on more in Power BI and elsewhere, and ultimately trying to make the data even more actionable, much more obvious, very easy to act upon for the users. So we're excited to share more about that soon. But yeah, that project at a glance portion that Josh was showing is an area that we'll be adding a lot to.
Great. I know everyone, myself included, is excited for those things that are coming down the pike. All right. With that being said, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this month's webinar, and we hope to see everyone here shortly in August. Thanks, everyone.